Good morning and welcome to this episode of the Ad Drop Podcast. As we continue our spin through the world of college athletics, I am pleased to be joined by the new head baseball coach at Illinois Wesleyan University, Michael Keller. Coach Keller, how are you doing this morning?
Thanks for having me. Definitely good that we're inside today and not out. That's for sure.
Most definitely. As someone who played baseball at Niagara, do you find it difficult to find good wings in Illinois?
That's a great question. You know what? We've got a couple good spots here. One I'll give a little plug. I don't know if we'll have any going to people, but Mugsy's, which is just right across the road, honestly, from campus here, is phenomenal. I definitely, a little bit different than what you get in the Buffalo area, but some really good wings for sure.
Now, as a former pitcher, right now, could you step in and give us about an inning of relief?
Gosh, that's a great question. I could get the ball in the zone, but I don't know how effective it would be. And maybe it'd be a good thing. Maybe it'd be, a good change of pace from our guys, and then you're seeing, 70, 75 miles an hour coming from me. Maybe I could keep a couple guys off balance.
Did you manage to have nine pickoffs as a pitcher in 2008?
You know what? That's a really good question. There's a guy from just up the road from the Gridley El Paso area, left-handed pitcher. Actually had some connections with my father, and when I was in high school, actually kind of taught me his pickoff move. And it was something that worked out really well for me. I definitely I don't broadcast it because that means I had probably a few too many guys on base, but it definitely when I got in those tough situations, definitely something that I used to my advantage to help get me out of some tough innings.
Was there ever a time that you picked a guy off and he was way too far off the base? And you're like, why are you leading this far? Like, well, he was out by a mile.
There was definitely some times, and even some times on the complete flip side of that, where guys knew you had a move and they knew you were thrown over, and they had a 2 or 3 foot lead, and you still picked them off. And it kind of you had both of those instances a little bit, but yeah, it's like gosh darn. We even tell our guys now like left-hander, good move, even some right-handers with some of their balk moves and some of the things that they do. Like you got to be aware and be smart, and it's amazing. Sometimes I guess guys just maybe fall asleep a little bit over there.
What was that first win like versus Coppin State?
Oh gosh, it was awesome. Definitely when you're transitioning from junior college to a 4 year, no matter the level, it's an adjustment period. I feel like a lot of the same for guys coming out of high school going into college. It was awesome just to get that kind of that first one under my belt, and I think it was a pretty high scoring affair, at least on our end. But just to be able to go out there, get some insurance, and just be like, okay, hey, I'm gonna go up, fill up the zone, let our defense work. We got a little bit of a lead to work with, and just go out there and pitch. It was definitely I think for a new guy, a little bit of a relief, which was nice.
What happened to the ball?
What's that?
Do you know what happened to the ball?
Oh, I still have it. I still have it.
Hey,
That was one. Yeah, that was one thing I feel like I did quite a bit. Was I've got actually in my office all the jar. I got a couple big mason jars of all the different conference balls and things that I used not only while I was playing but while I was coaching. And then I do have a handful of balls throughout my playing career that I kept, and that was definitely one. Was the my first Division I win.
now we flash back to '09. You had two complete games there, including a shutout. Do you think that the complete game is starting to slowly drift away because of the specialization and the dependence on the bullpen?
Oh, for sure. I mean, and I think you just look at the numbers in general, the guys who throw complete games. Now, I will say in college, I think it's a little more prevalent for sure. College, especially, depending on the guy and the situation. But it's definitely going away. I mean, um, you don't have the guys that will throw complete games every time that they go out there, especially in college. I mean, I think that was something you would see some high end guys, back when I was in school that, man, they'd have five, six, seven complete games. And it's just with, I think, velocity, wear and tear, pitch count, all those things that get factored in. And I know now, we're seeing, not only more strikeouts, but also more walks. I think some of that comes with higher velocity and maybe not as good a command. So I think there's a lot of factors that play into it. But yeah, unfortunately, the guys who go out there and you let them have the ball and they make it really make you take it from them, or they go all nine is just not as prevalent as it was.
What did Coach Martell impart upon you his wisdom before he retired?
Oh gosh. There were a lot of things. I mean, I spent 6 years with him as an assistant, being right down the road for a few years at Illinois State. I got to know him recruiting wise. And honestly, I grew up here in Bloomington Normal. I don't know if Coach Martell, I know Coach Rose, our basketball coach, definitely doesn't want me to share this info, but I actually went to their youth camps when I was growing up. So, that's the longevity that Coach Martell and some of our other staff members here have had. Um, but I think just his kind of approach to the game and how he would go about managing it, and I think something completely unrelated to baseball is just his. I mean, he was an unbelievable person in terms of like within our athletic department. If anybody ever needed anything, hey, we've got to set up for a home basketball game, or even shoot, he had his CDL. He would drive our buses occasionally, like during the winter. Anytime somebody needed something, he would step up, and I think that goes a long way for earning trust and kind of relationships within our athletic department. That's one thing I think Coach Martell, like, gosh, his willingness to step up and help for whatever was huge. And I think definitely something that hopefully I can continue without my, I definitely can't drive a bus. Unfortunately, I don't have my CDL, but in other sense, I definitely would love to continue that.
Your first game is not too far away as a head coach at, at Wesleyan. Are you nervous? Are there nerves, or because you've been in and around a game your entire career, there are really no nerves?
No, it's definitely it's the same game, but I think people always say when you move over, 16 inches or 2 feet from assistant coaching position to a head coach, there's always going to be a little bit of nerves there. But I think once we get going, the familiarity with the game and what we're trying to do, and I'll give a huge plug to our new assistant. This is the first time we've ever had a full-time assistant. When I was in that role, I had to work in admissions and did some things that made my position full-time. This summer, we were fortunate enough to get a full-time assistant that, for the most part, is baseball only. He's done an incredible job with his, my pitching background. I do handle a lot of the pitching stuff, and I've given him a lot of uh, leeway with kind of his philosophy and what he wants to do with our hitters, and obviously under kind of my vision and what I want our offense to be and things like that. But he's done a great job, and I know having him there and what he brings will be a big help for me. So I definitely some nerves for sure. But I think once we get going, that first pitch is thrown and we get hopefully that first run under our belt early in that game, I think everything else will go back to normal.
What is more difficult to coach? Say you have two pitchers. One doesn't have the greatest stuff, but has the mentality of want to get the batter out, want to compete. The other one, blessed with every athletic ability as far as being a pitcher that you could find, has multiple pitches, but doesn't quite have that knack yet for that bulldog mentality. Which would be a tougher coach?
I think the second option, the latter, is tougher to coach. I mean, when you get a guy who just will go out there and give you everything he has, compete, and has that mentality, obviously stuff plays an important part of it. You can't go out there. You talked about me going out there and giving you an inning. I'm not going to be able to get guys out at a high level like some of our top end arms would be able to. But at some point, stuff and skill very often is a guy so good that it just negates everything else. Where that's where that I think that ability to compete and have that mindset plays a big part. And so I think a guy that has that, you can work with a guy that maybe has a little lesser stuff, but has that mentality, will go out there, compete, and never going to make excuses, rather than a guy who has great stuff But on any given day, there's something that just it's whether it's the umpire, the strike zone, the weather, body's not feeling great. I think there's sometimes guys always have those sometimes guys have built-in excuses. That's a little bit tougher, even though hey, their stuff and their ability, maybe they have a higher ceiling and better stuff.
Have you sat back and kind of taken a moment to kind of look around and say, wow, I'm actually in the chair now?
I have. I mean, it's definitely been, I say, kind of a whirlwind. And from the one standpoint, I feel like I'm pretty lucky, just because I have been here. I've been at the university, know the people, know our guys. So I think from that standpoint, it was an easy adjustment. But I will also say I'll be the first person to tell you, the fall and even right now, I think a little bit of treading water, trying to make sure that hey, everything that we're trying to do, and from scheduling to hotels and meals and getting all that stuff ready, spring break trip and everything, and then on top of it, we've been pretty fortunate with some exciting things coming down the pipeline, setting up an alumni golf outing and things like that throughout the course of our year. I will say I am a little bit treading water, but it's definitely nice when you kind of have the control to say of hey, this is how we're going to do things. And I definitely have with Mike Wagner, our AD, who's phenomenal, my assistant, that obviously are great sounding boards and help me make good decisions for things that we're trying to do within our program.
What would surprise people most about the competition in the CCIW?
You know what? I think there's always in baseball, it's crazy to me, how good collegiate baseball is. And obviously everybody knows you watch the College World Series, and you're watching the Tennessees and the LSUs and the Texases and everybody like that. But I think as a whole, from high level Division 1, Power Four, Power Five, whatever you want to call it, all the way down to mid to small major Division 1 schools, and then even going to Division 2, Division 3, junior college, NAIA, how good baseball is overall throughout every level. I mean, we've been very fortunate, with COVID and the extra years of eligibility. And I know some of that stuff is changing right now with giving guys extra years of eligibility and things like that. But where we've had some really good players, I mean, right after COVID, we had two players that went down to UIS and a Division 2 school. And year after, one was a starter, one was a closer, and helped them get to a College World Series. We had an outfielder a couple years ago, went to Eastern Illinois, was kind of a fourth outfielder for them. They made it to an NCAA regional. We just had one of our all-region center fielders last year, who's at University of Cincinnati at a Power Four school. I think you're going to get guys like that, and there's been other schools, obviously, in our conference that have had players that have gone on and done some great things at some higher levels because of extra eligibility. But I think the top end talent, no matter the level, I think it may not be guy throwing 100, but I think every school in our conference, a lot of Division 3s, have guys that could play at mid-major, high-level Division 1s. Now we don't have the depth of those schools, top to bottom, but the talent is pretty impressive. And I think the other thing that's kind of been a big thing, is the facilities and the resources that you see, and great coaches and the just the overall skill level, talent level, and top to bottom has grown drastically. I think even just in the last 10 years.
When you look at your roster, have you ever, at being at this level, have you ever seen a roster of so many taller players?
Yeah, you know what? I have, and I think that was one thing, and maybe it's something that was ingrained in me, when I was at Illinois State. Our head coach at the time, he goes, I want to get to the airport. I want to get off the bus. And sometimes I want people to think that we're like a basketball team. You got big, tall guys. And again, that's not a, hey, we're going to be cookie cutter and we're only going to recruit guys that are 6'2" and above. But I think there's something to that. There are some times, especially when you talk about pitching and things like that, when you have some height, there's some things that can't be taught. But at the when it comes down to it, we're trying to recruit the best player, whether that guy's 6'5", 6'6", or he's 5'10". But I will say I definitely like when teams look at us and they're, hey, man, these are a bunch of, big, tall, physical guys. I don't mind that. I think there's a little bit that goes into that.
No, you had a freshman last year, now a sophomore, and John Philip Ferraro, where if you look at his stats and you look at how he plays, he one puts bat to ball very well, only striking out, I think, 9 times. What do you expect from a freshman who had so much success to be able to translate that to next season?
Yeah, I think the toughest thing, and whether it's a freshman, a sophomore, or junior, is replicating that, especially when you do have a guy that's an unknown. There's maybe not as many reports out there. He faces schools in our conference 2 or 3 times. They maybe don't know how to pitch him as, when you talk about a sophomore or junior, they've maybe seen him, 12, 20, 25, 30 times. There does, the report starts to get out there a little bit. But I think the one thing I try and tell our young guys, and whether it's JP or anybody else, is you can't base expectations off of last year. You can't have pressure based on last year. You got to go out, and if you have a good approach and good at bats, most of the time, it's not always going to work out. But if you do that, the results will take care of themselves. I think JP is ultra talented. Like you said, his bat to ball skills, limiting his strikeouts. I mean, one thing he does really well that I think is tough is a young hitter who is able to drive the ball the other way. You just, to me, that's a high level hitter, a guy that's going to hit, and he's able to do that. I think the one thing that will change and will start to develop, he's a big physical guy. I think he's going to start to hit for some more power. Able to start pulling some balls and doing some things where he's already a good hitter. Now we start developing that power tool. I think he's going to be even better. But I just think you can't look at last year's stats and as much as it's really easy for me to say because I don't have the bat in my hand or I'm not on the mound, you can't put that pressure. Man, I really performed last year. I got to do it again. It's a new year. It's a different season. Baseball's a really tough game. I think if you prepare the right way and you do everything that you need to do and you can control, the results will take care of themselves. Good, bad, or indifferent. But I think with his mature approach at the plate, I think it's going to be tough for him to have a bad year. And like I said, I'm really looking forward to him contributing more and hopefully adding to some of those power numbers.
Speaking of, kind of by the same token, you have a senior and closer, Luke Schwab, who came in, shut the door on 3 games last year. How comforting is to know, as a former pitcher, that you know in case you have to get to the back end of the rotation, or back end of what you have as pitchers, and try to get into that bullpen, you have somebody that can walk in, close a game, and not be too affected by the pressure of the situation.
Yeah, it's huge. And I think not only, say, eighth, ninth inning where most people think, hey, that's when you use a closer. I mean, you talked about the new game and, you're not seeing starting pitchers. I think now you're also starting to see using high leverage bullpen arms, whether they be a closer or back end guy in the sixth or seventh inning when you have a big situation. You've got first and second, nobody out, and you bring in that guy or, you have maybe a couple guys that fill that role and can get you out of that jam and then you maybe go to you your setup guy or your third or fourth bullpen arm with a clean inning and you don't have the pressure that you may have with some runners on and trying to keep the game close or keep the lead. But it's definitely nice to have a guy like that, and we have a couple guys like that I feel comfortable with. Lucas Costello, Nate Waterman. I mean, we have a couple of Jake Pullum, some guys in the back end that are juniors that have done it at a high level at times. And so it definitely makes our job really easy when we have confidence in those guys to go to them in those situations and we feel good. Hey, it's is it always going to work out? No, but hey, they're guys that are going to give us the best chance to get out of those situations.
Now, as somebody from the state of Illinois, were you a Cubs fan or a White Sox fan or a Cardinals fan?
I'm actually a Cardinals fan, which is I think here where we're at, we're really divided. Being in Central Illinois, I think you don't have a ton of White Sox fans. I will say that, but you do have. I think Central Illinois is fairly divided. 50-50 probably Cubs and Cardinals.
How would you fix the Cardinals if you were given the ability to snap your fingers and make it happen?
Oh gosh, I definitely think they need to. Um, I think pitching is first and foremost. When they've been good, that's what they've had. I think they've got to start there and kind of build up, and then it's kind of I think it fluctuates year to year. I think they do need some help in the outfield. Obviously, Arenado and his bat, didn't have the year that they expected. They lose Goldschmidt. Now I do think they do have some talented young guys coming up through their organization, but for me, it starts on the mound, and I think they need to upgrade a little bit. With not only the starting pitching but bullpen.
Your favorite Cardinals player of all time?
Oh gosh, that's a tough one. I'm definitely a little biased to Yadier Molina. I think is probably true Cardinal through and through. Played for the Cardinals through his whole year. But I mean, you also got those older guys. I know my dad's a big Cardinal fan. You got the Bob Gibsons, the Lou Brocks, the Stan Musials. Definitely have some. Those guys definitely hold a special place with um, the history of the Cardinals. But I would say during my time, my era, probably Yadier Molina is probably my favorite.
Do you balance being a coach and also being the parent of three kids?
It's tough. It's tough. I think the one thing, it's always a work in progress. I will be the first person to say it. I'm sure my wife would chime in. I'm not always great at it. Is when I do have time and I am at home, being present with them. There's always stuff that can be done, and I'm sure every coach that's out there knows recruiting, emails. There's always, you got issues with your players and stuff going on, even when you're not on campus. But when I'm at home, trying my best and to be present with them and spend time with them. I love being home to put my kids down for bed. That doesn't always work with our schedule, but that's one thing I try. And one thing I think I love about this level, Division 3, is not only is it the student athlete philosophy where they have some more opportunities to um, better themselves from an academic standpoint, where there's not maybe the restrictions on when you can take classes and what you can do after that, and we have a little more time, a little less time in the fall, for practices and workouts, especially outside of our non-championship season, where they get some opportunities to do that. And I think the same goes for us as coaches, where we have the ability and a little more flexibility to be home and get home and be at home and do those things, which I've over the last, like I said, 6 years as an assistant, and this year as a head coach have kind of grown to love, and it's definitely nice where I can be there and be around for my kids.
New head baseball coach at Illinois Wesleyan University, Michael Keller. Coach Keller, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the AdDrop Podcast.
Thanks, Terrance.